Hi, I'm John Pruzanski and welcome to the Health Balance Project. I'm not a doctor and I'm not a trained nutritionist, but I am a publisher and I know how to get to the facts, how to separate the wheat from the chaff. The aim here is simple: to cut through the noise, strip away the hype, and make sense of how what you eat, how you move, and how you live actually shape your health. Because once you understand the system, you're already most of the way there. And today we're doing a deep dive into a subject that seems to generate confusion from all quarters. Off the shelf, where supplements lie. Weight is a signal. Energy is a signal. Even how clearly you think is a signal. They all reflect how well your body is coping with the modern world. And somewhere along the way, we've come to believe that if something is missing, we can simply take it in a capsule. Supplements promise exactly that. More energy, better focus, longer life. It's a compelling idea. But to understand whether any of that actually makes sense, we need to step back and ask a more basic question. What are supplements really? At their core, they're simple. They're inputs: vitamins, minerals, amino acids, fatty acids, plant compounds, things the body needs. And in principle, that idea holds, because the body doesn't run on calories alone. It runs on chemistry. Thousands of interacting substances working together in systems. Now, obviously, the best place to get those substances is still food, not just because food is natural, but because it's structured. Food delivers the combination of nutrients, fiber, water, energy, and context all at once. A tomato isn't just lycopene. A fish isn't just omega-3. They're complete packages. And that matters because when we isolate a single compound, we can often lose the effect we were chasing. But there is a tension here. There are a lot of essential and potentially useful compounds, and to get all of them from food alone, you would need to eat an almost perfectly constructed diet, or you'd simply have to eat too much. So supplementation becomes tempting, not as a replacement for food, but as a way of filling the gaps. And this is where things start to become more nuanced. Supplements don't exist in isolation. They only make sense in context, not as a stack, not as a blanket solution, but as targeted inputs for specific needs. So instead of asking, what should I take? The more useful question becomes, what problem am I trying to solve? Once you look at it that way, a structure begins to emerge. Some supplementation is about covering likely gaps. Modern life tends to create predictable shortfalls. Less time in the sun makes vitamin D relevant. Lower intake of whole foods can mean magnesium becomes an issue. If fish isn't regularly on the plate, omega-3 becomes a question. And in some cases, a deficit of iodine or B12 enter the picture, depending on your diet. Even here, though, the system is more complex than it first appears. Minerals don't operate independently. Zinc and copper interact. Magnesium, calcium, and vitamin D influence each other. Iron is essential, but in excess it becomes harmful. These are not background nutrients, they are tightly regulated parts of the system. So here's the rule. Don't supplement minerals blindly. And this is where more is not better. This is where more can actually make things worse. And then there are electrolytes: sodium, potassium, magnesium. These are not performance enhancers, they are basic physiology. If you're eating normally and not sweating heavily, you probably don't need to think about them. But change the system. If you're doing keto, intermittent fasting, or training hard, then sodium, potassium, and magnesium can suddenly become critical. If you feel flat, lightheaded, fatigued, it may not be low energy, it may be low electrolytes. So again, context. Take fatigue. It's one of the most common reasons people reach for supplements. But fatigue is not one problem. It can come from low energy intake, poor sleep, stress, electrolyte imbalance, or micronutrient deficiency. In that context, the idea of a single energy supplement starts to fall apart. What becomes clear is that most fatigue isn't solved by adding energy, but by fixing the system that produces it. So here's the practical approach. If fatigue is persistent, check the basics: sleep, food intake, electrolytes, and if needed, get your blood work. Check your iron, B12, vitamin D. Only once you know what's missing does it make sense to add something. Otherwise, you're just guessing. By contrast, performance-focused supplementation tends to be more grounded. As demand increases, so do the needs of the system. At low levels of activity, very little supplementation is required beyond a solid diet. As training increases, protein adequacy becomes important. Electrolytes matter more. And at higher levels of intensity, targeted inputs like creatine begin to make sense. But even here there are limits. Once the system is saturated, more adds nothing. The body doesn't reward excess, and sometimes it can be downright damaging. And then there's the idea of boosting the immune system, one of the most persistent narratives in the supplement world. Vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, these all play roles in immune function, but the immune system isn't something you simply turn up. It's something you regulate. Too little support and it struggles. Too much of certain inputs and it can become dysregulated in other ways. Ignore the idea that more immune supplements equals more protection. And that pattern, that balance, shows up again and again. It becomes even more pronounced when we move into the world of longevity and optimization. This is where the modern supplement narrative becomes much more ambitious. Resveratrol, NAD boosters, even drugs like metformin are being discussed in healthy populations, all aimed at slowing aging, improving cellular function, and extending lifespan. But let me be clear of the issue that is more than nuance. The true research on longevity and brain optimization is centered on reprogramming and altering genes on the cellular level. It's an exciting field, but it has very little to do with supplementation. Yes, biology is often fascinating, and supplements alone may affect pathways and mechanisms, but the outcomes are much less certain. But by contrast, it's quite clear that the big drivers of brain health come from sleep, movement, metabolic health, social engagement, and how well the system is functioning overall. And this connects to something even more important to recognize. Your needs change across your life. When you're younger, the focus is on building energy, muscle, bone, resilience. In that phase, the risk is often over-supplementing, trying to optimize things that are already working well. In midlife, the focus shifts. Recovery becomes more important. Sleep can become more fragile. Stress accumulates. Metabolic health starts to play a larger role. And later in life, the priorities shift again. Muscle preservation, protein intake, vitamin D, B12 absorption, bone health, and the brain become central. But even here, the principle holds. You're not building long-term brain health by layering on exotic compounds. So when it comes to longevity and brain health, the goal isn't to find the perfect compound, it's to reduce the things that accelerate decline and support things that maintain function. And if a supplement helps within that framework, it has a place. But if it's trying to replace it, it probably doesn't. So in the longevity and brain space, restraint matters even more. Which brings us back to the practical question. What should you actually do? And the answer is simpler than it appears. Start with food, build a system that works, then adjust based on how you live. If there are likely gaps, address them, but don't assume them. Treat minerals with respect. Think about electrolytes only when the system changes. And if you're dealing with fatigue more broadly, don't guess. Look at sleep, intake, stress, and if needed, check what's actually going on. If you exercise, scale your inputs with your demand. The more you ask of your body, the more precise your support needs to be. And be cautious in the optimization space. The more complex the claim, the more restraint is required. Not everything needs to be optimized. Not everything needs to be added. Because in the end, supplements don't create health, they support it when something is missing. The body isn't lacking random compounds, it's responding to how you live. And once you see that clearly, supplements become much simpler. Not a solution in themselves, but a way sometimes to support the system that's already in place. So stay well, stay healthy, and stay balanced.